I have such wonderful conversations in the run of a week with so many different people, and there's sometimes, there's a common theme in many conversations, and it's like, how can I put it? People are struggling with something that is so deep within them and so beautiful, and at some point the conversation turns and it goes something like this. You're going to think I'm crazy, but... And then they tell the most beautiful story of a humble God who confronted them in the most unexpected ways and had such a profoundly beautiful impact on their heart, that it reorients their sense of being, it reorients their sense of purpose, and it brings them this peace that surpasses all understanding. And I had a conversation that stood out to me this week. Now I want to paint a picture. This dear woman was talking about her family, and she was talking about her siblings. And then she said this, it's the most benign thing, but it really had a big impact on me. This is what she said. I have 12 nephews and nieces. Well, actually 10. 2 of them are mine. And so what really stood out to me was when she said, 2 of them are mine. 2 of them are mine. She was describing her relationship with her children, who are now adults. 2 of them are mine. They are mine. I am their mother. They are my children. Now, tell me, does this sound like the language of a contract, which delineates this is your obligation and this is my obligation? No, I don't think so. I think this is the language of a covenant that is lived out in the madness of this world. A covenant is not a contract. A covenant says, I am yours and you are mine. Now let's put this into perspective of our first reading from the prophet Jeremiah. So he would have prophesied to the people of Israel around the 6th century BC, at a time when the Babylonian Empire was encroaching on Judea, on the territory of Israel and Judea. And the prophet, he kept saying to them, we've got to change our ways. We're not living out of this covenantal relationship with God. We're choosing our own way. At best, we're into some sort of contractual reality with one another, but we have forgotten about this great covenant with God, God who says, I am yours and you are mine. And in the midst of this prophesying, so the Babylonians eventually invade Judea. They destroy the temple in Jerusalem. They profane the sacred objects that were used for holy worship in the temple. They did what militaries have done throughout history and continue to do today. They raped and killed women. And this is just an ongoing part of the brokenness of the world. Now, in the midst of it, Jeremiah says, I am with you always. Jeremiah prophesies about a vision of a future restoration and renewal for the Israelites during this great time of suffering and despair. Jeremiah's prophecy speaks to the enduring faithfulness of God and his commitment to his covenant with his people, despite their disobedience and the consequences of it. Now, okay, I'm talking about suffering and prophecies from the 6th century before Christ. But is suffering not part of life? I wish it wasn't so, but it is. And when we suffer, we pursue the truth out of living out of this covenant of God's merciful love toward us, that we may emulate this even in the midst of the world, that we may surrender to this even in the midst of this broken world. God says continually to us, I am yours and you are mine. And today's gospel reading, John invites us, I think, to reflect on the profound question proposed by these Greeks who approach Philip and say, Sir, we wish to see Jesus. This simple but profound question or statement, we wish to see Jesus, echoes in the depths of our own hearts as well. We too yearn to see Jesus, to encounter him in our lives, to experience his presence, his love, and his guidance. Now, when the apostles brought this question to Jesus, Sir, we wish to see Jesus. They're saying there's some Greeks out here and they want to see you. Jesus doesn't actually even answer the question. He doesn't say, sure, bring them on in, I'd like to have a conversation with them. He spoke about his own suffering in the midst of about what he was to endure. He speaks about, this is before his physical suffering began, so he's speaking out of a place of deep emotional suffering. He's speaking out of a place of profound mental and spiritual suffering. Take this cup from me, he says a little while later in the Garden of Gethsemane. But not my will be done, your will be done. So he's in the early stages of suffering that ultimately leads to physical suffering and his crucifixion. So, do we have the courage to say we want to see Jesus? Spend some time with a mother who's caring for her suffering daughter. Spend some time with a son who's sitting at the bedside of his mother who's well down a path of dementia. Spend some time with a wife who's dealing with cancer that has devastated the physical body of her husband. You want to see Jesus? Spend some time with a man who has the humility in the quietness of his own house, in his living room or in his bedroom, to kneel and pray. I so love being the pastor of this parish. I so love the conversations that I've had over the past nearly 3 years and the stories and the people that I've met. There was one man who was here for every single daily Mass who used to sit down the back, and after receiving the Blessed Sacrament, he would bring up a pyx so that he could bring the Blessed Sacrament to his wife, who was in a long-term care facility because of her journey down a path of dementia. You want to see Jesus? Talk to people like this. Talk to people like him. And then, in this short period of time of not even 3 years since I've been here, this man suddenly died, and his son moved back from another province to deal with the death of his father and the infirmity of his mother. And so where I, as a priest in this beautiful parish, was putting a Blessed Sacrament in the hands of a husband and then one into the pyx so he could bring it to his wife, I'm now putting the Blessed Sacrament in the hands of a son who's bringing the Blessed Sacrament to his mother, the same thing that his father used to do before he suddenly passed. You want to see Jesus? Spend some time with the suffering of the world. Spend some time who's dealing with the trauma from their childhood. Spend some time with people who are dealing with emotional, physical suffering. Spend some time who are trying to live out of the depths of their own being but are struggling because they feel so lonely and they don't know who to talk to. as I speak, I got a text this morning from a dear man whose wife is in hospital. She's pregnant, and they're very, very concerned about the pregnancy. It's quite advanced. I think they're at least in the 3rd trimester, if not further along. We need to confront suffering. We need to confront our response to suffering. We need to be present to suffering. That's what he did for us. And he teaches us how to suffer with one another, how to be present to one another in the midst of our suffering. In our quest to see Jesus, we often search for him in the spectacular, in the extraordinary, in the grandiose. We may expect thunderous signs and miraculous wonders, hoping for unmistakable evidence of his existence. Yet as we journey through life with faith, we come to realize that Jesus often reveals himself to us in the most unexpected places and in the most unexpected moments of our life. This woman who I spoke with earlier, I want to give you a brief story of what she went through one particular Christmas Eve when she went to bed with her husband and her adult children were visiting the family home for Christmas. And this dear 59-year-old man had a massive seizure and died. She was so struggling with this, as we would, like, Lord, where were you? Where were you? She couldn't even think, well, she could think of it. She couldn't muster up the internal resources to go into a church. And after about a year, she was walking in a grocery store, I think it was, and something shifted in her in the most unexpected way. Rather than seeing what she had lost, rather than seeing seeing through the lens of everything that was taken away from her, the husband she loved, the future they had planned, rather than seeing through what was lost, she spoke about how everything shifted in her mind, and all of a sudden she was able to get glimpses of gratitude. And so she then started to see, well, I'm thankful for this man who I was married to for 30 years. I'm thankful for his life. I'm thankful for our children. I'm thankful for what's happening in my heart right now. I can't really explain it. How did this happen? And to see someone come alive in such a beautiful way speaks to how God is present in our suffering, in our own suffering, and that yearning, that deep surrender that he's calling to. You are mine, and I am yours. Trust me, I am in this mess with you. To truly see Jesus, we must look beyond the surface. We must get into the deep, because it was Jesus who said, cast your nets into the deep. I'm taking you from the shallow water into the deeper water. Don't focus on the waves and the storm. Trust me. Cast your nets into the deep, and it is in this deep that we commune with the eternal deep. We must confront our own suffering. We must confront our own suffering and the suffering in the world. Seeing Jesus requires a willingness to embrace the mystery of the cross, the reality of suffering, and the hope of the resurrection. Just as Jesus embraced his own suffering and death for the sake of love, we are called to take up our crosses and to follow him. It is through our own struggles, it is through our own sufferings, it is through our own trials and challenges that we come to see Jesus most vividly, for it is in our weakness that his strength is made known in our lives. And oh, what a joy to journey with people whose presence is made known, who have had the humility to surrender to Jesus' presence, even in the midst of their suffering. Amen.